I wouldn't have called it curiosity porn. Curiosity Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue at best, maybe.
Do you get aroused by stimulating intellectual conversation? Are you turned on by the idea of engaging with thought leaders from across the United States? Do you go gaga over exploring important ideas from influential books, research, and essays? Then welcome to Curiosity Porn, the place you can satisfy all those intellectual urges guilt-free. Your hosts are Dr. Guy Crane, Professor of Philosophy at Rose State College, and Professor James Davenport, Professor of Political Science at Rose State College. However, the views expressed here are solely the views of the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of Rose State College, its administration, faculty, or students. And now, here are James and Guy. Good afternoon, Dr. Crane.
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I am okay. I was all excited that I thought we were about to hit warm weather, and then this week has just crashed.
Well, okay. That makes one of us. You realize this is my climate. This is what I'm after in life is the cold.
Maybe it's an age thing. The older I've gotten, the more intolerant of the cold weather
I am losing my tolerance for the heat, so I don't know what's going on.
Interesting. But yeah, so other than that, not bad. School is, plodding along. Students are so far being pretty good and cooperative.
No, yeah, me too. I've got a good class, good discussion so far. People really are plugged in. It's been a good experience. It's always good when, how hard it is to deal, like when I've only had a couple of semesters like that, but when like the classroom vibe's just off.
Yes.
And you cannot quite get the chemistry to be right. It doesn't matter if you like wear a clown suit or like hand out free candy. Yeah. Or promise them points for just smiling. I mean, you almost cannot fix it. And it really is just soul sucking to have that kind of experience. And so I always appreciate it when like I have a particularly good vibe going on in class. I gotta ride that high and be sure I do everything I can to keep it,
Exactly. I feel exactly the same way. And I've got a class that is very engaged this semester. So that makes it just makes it teaching more enjoyable.
Yeah, I know. I've already gotten reinvested in teaching just because of that.
Awesome. Well, in this episode, we're going to kind of do a recap of the last, let's see, we've had how many episodes that we've recorded so far?
Well, released episodes, are not the same as recording sessions because we've had some two-parters, right?
Right.
So by released episodes, we are currently doing episode 19.
Look at that. So one more and we'll be up to 20.
Yeah.
That's got to be a milestone of some sort, right?
Maybe. We're almost to no, I don't know. What's the 25th anniversary? It's not diamonds.
No. 25th
gold
is
anniversary.
No, 50th is gold. 25th is silver.
We're almost to a silver.
Silver, that's right.
I can live with that.
But
I have to right out of the gate say that when I showed up today, I actually had intended to try to out you by saying, "And what did you do to prepare for this episode today, James?" And I sat down, and you are actually holding a page of notes in your hand.
Yes, no. So for our listeners, Guy made a list of questions that he kind of wanted us to run through and discuss about our slightly more than a year's time of recording. And yesterday, it just hit me. I was like, I better put some notes down just so I can make sure I hit what I want to say and have something to say. I was not expecting you to be loaded just in case. But I'm glad I had that thought in my head. You better get prepared.
How did you listen to any of our old episodes?
I listened to a couple. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I listened to about 5 and maybe the first 10 minutes or so of a couple more.
Okay.
I did listen, because we're going to go there. I did listen to like the last 2 or 3 minutes of all of the episodes. And of course, our listeners will find out why at the end, right?
Yes, that's right.
What the idea here is, maybe it would be good for us as a podcast anyway to be having some sort of annual reflection on how we did, how things went,
Right.
Especially since we are, at least so far, primarily a guest-driven format. We don't always get a whole lot of chance to try to like chew through what a lot of the guests said because we're trying to get just what they say on the table, right?
Right. No, that's right. That's right. And before we get into some of the meat of this, I just want to give me your thoughts about, just your overall thoughts about the experience of doing this podcast and what you have taken away from it.
Okay. I definitely want to contrast this with my teaching because, as you're aware, for a lot of my classes, I make a lot of video content almost from scratch. And so let me tell you, now that we've gotten to record something where I have like almost zero editing duties whatsoever, it's so much more fun to do something like that than to sit there and painstakingly pick out each second. Cut away just like that.
Right.
You get to come here and it's fancier digs than just being in my office making a video. It's really nice in here. We have excellent personnel working for us. I think overall it's been a very positive experience, I would say.
Yeah, no, me too. The folks at Possibilities Inc. are fantastic to work with. They work magic. Santiago, Bridget, Peaches sometimes when she's filling in, all do a great job of putting the program together as far as the technical side, making sure that we sound halfway decent. They can only work with the talent that they have. So, there are limits to their ability. I want to acknowledge that.
I think I have found out, because I did so much listening and I listened on my headphones and in the car. And I think one of the things I've discovered about myself is that I've got like a, not the greatest FM radio voice.
Okay.
So you actually come across pretty sharp, but I so especially in my car, feel like I want to turn up the treble so much so that I can kind of distinguish my words better. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but oh well.
Well, I am fortunate. I've had a number of years of experience. I don't know. I'm sure I've told you this before, but
you've done radio.
I've done radio, right? Had a talk radio show, and so I'm comfortable in this format. But just the whole experience of working with the folks at Possibilities Inc., being in this studio, being able to have guests remotely and have that work out really well, all of that has been fantastic in my opinion. I mean, from our side of just being able to coordinate all of this, I think it's went really well.
We have even had to do an episode so far, at least, where both us and the guest had to be remote, and it still worked out. I mean, that's impressive.
And it's nice to be able to have that kind of flexibility when you have to have it, right? Yeah. All right. So where do you want to go? What do you want to talk about? What's on your mind?
Okay. I should tell the listeners that yes, even though I have a list of questions in front of me, James can attest that this is the least amount of preparation I have probably ever done for one of these episodes. He knows that I usually show up with about 4 or 5 pages of notes, of semi-scripted questions. And I really was going to try today, to prepare, like I listened to all the episodes, but to just wing it. At least as much as I am capable as a person of winging it.
Okay.
So, yeah,
that's fair. So you've moved a little bit into the winging it scenario. I moved a little bit into a little bit preparedness scenario.
Let's be real.
Well, wonders never cease.
I think it's only about 5% in both directions. I don't think it's a dramatic conversion.
Progress is progress.
Well, okay. No, I won't disagree with you about that. Let's just start with, now I want to separate these out because not all of our episodes are having a guest with us.
That's correct.
So I want to ask separately first favorite guest and then favorite episode.
Okay.
If they're the same, whatever, but I wanted there to be a chance to be a distinction. Right. So who would you say is your favorite guest that we've had?
Oh, that was hard for me because I really feel like we have not had a bad guest at all. I thought everybody that we've had on has done a good job. They communicated in a way that was effective and people could follow along. So I don't feel like we had a bad guest at all. Some names that popped up into my head as I was listening to the show, and I actually listened to the podcast pretty regularly because I'm trying to critique myself as well as anything else. But really enjoyed the episode. You weren't able to be in this episode, but with Robert Lighton, who talked about his book, Good Capitalism, Bad Capitalism.
Amazing. Right out of the gate, he says, I like the one where you weren't even in it.
But I thought he had some good insights. I really enjoyed Anthony Fowler. I wish we could have broadened that conversation out a little bit more. We focused kind of on his civic duty voting.
Civic duty voting, right.
I wish we could have broadened that out a little bit more. I thought he was really good. And Michael Munger was another one that I really enjoyed visiting with. And that's just because I'd followed all of these folks. I don't want to say I've been a fan of, but I followed either on social media or I've read their books or listened to their podcasts. And so these were people like, these people are interesting and I'd like to visit with them. And I felt like they were still interesting when we got to visit with them.
Okay. See, I guess what we should have done, maybe we'll do this as we go through. Maybe to make this more fun, we should have tried to guess each other's answer first because I definitely thought you were going to say Munger. That one doesn't shock me in the slightest. Listeners, I joke with James frequently every time we talk about guests that if he had his way, we'd only have about 9 economists and one other non-economist on for every 10 episodes. So I'm surprised that he put some other people in there as well.
I'm trying to branch out, right? I'm trying to stretch out, and I do want some more. I'm a political scientist. I want some more political scientists, but they're not always as kind of out there as economists are for some reason right now.
Okay,
so,
willing to ask wacky questions, that
right?
kind of thing.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
aware of
Exactly.
that. That's right.
Yeah.
Mine might shock you then.
Okay.
No. You do. Who do you suspect my favorite guest was?
Let's see. I'm trying to think. I might go with like Jerry Green.
That was my favorite guest.
Was that really? Yeah. Okay. And that was a good conversation.
Why do you think that was my favorite one?
Well, first of all, the subject matter. I think it was really interesting. Number 2, we know him personally. And so it's nice when you have somebody that you kind of already have a rapport with and the conversation doesn't necessarily feel as maybe, I don't want to say scripted, but constrained as it could. So
that was point for point what I was going to say. I kept thinking like, we've had, especially for being a burgeoning podcast, we've had some very impressive names on already out of the gate. To shocker, some of these people said yes, probably before they were aware that
what they were getting into.
But yeah, I just thought it was frankly fun to talk with him through conspiracy theory kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then number 1, yes, we've been friends with Jerry for a long time. And number 2, he was in here with us. I re-listened to that episode.
That really makes a difference.
And the sort of conversational flow of that was one of our strongest episodes. I think we had a vibe consistent throughout the entire episode. Sure. I think so.
No, I agree with that. There's something about that face-to-face interaction that everybody's a little bit more comfortable. And you, again, as having a pre-existing relationship with them, you kind of have a feel for their communication style, your communication style. And it could just be a little bit more free flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But separate from that, do you have a favorite episode?
I really am going to, again, there were several of them, but I'm going to say if you made me pick one, it would be The Devil Made Me Do It, our discussion of the Satanic Panic.
Okay. I'm impressed.
I really enjoyed that one a lot. A couple of my kids listened to it and they really enjoyed it too. So I thought that was it was fun. It was interesting. And I learned a little bit of something in the process. So yes, that one really, I enjoyed that a lot.
We did do a follow-up with the Eastridge brothers, yes, and I'm just thinking like we probably could have just done a follow-up, you and me, because you and I both there were plenty of other little trinkets that we did not talk about from the era that both of us lived through. Believe it or not, that is not the one that I picked.
Okay, which one did you go with?
Listen, I told you I didn't listen to all 18. I listened to about a half a dozen, but I was shocked at just how strong an episode this was. And it's that you want us to stop hating each other.
Look at that.
James Davenport wants us to stop hating each other. When I listened to that again, now here is what I'm shocked about that is because yes, I admit it. I had probably about 10 or 11 pages of notes that I had prepared trying to
You
put that
did.
episode.
I mean, I was impressed by your preparation at all.
Well, but listening to it, We maintained a certain sort of tennis-like banter back and forth really strongly. And also we were just, I mean, it helps that there was like 20 different papers we were discussing in the course of just discussing your paper. But like some of the details were just juicy. Even re-listening to it, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. That's crazy how that turned out. Yeah, I just thought it was a pretty well put together episode.
I just want to mention something because this has struck me, and I had a conversation with one of our prior guests, recently, a couple of conversations with him. And that was Anthony Fowler. He actually disagrees with me on that. He does not think the polarization and the divide is as big as it's being made out. Maybe sometime we could get him back on and just have a go around about that.
Yeah, we could. Was he making any distinction between policy versus affective?
His thing is there is this kind of polarization among the elites, but not so much among average people. And so my question is, well, who do we count as elites? Because maybe we're closer together than we think we are. But I still am pretty convinced that there's a lot of this affective polarization out there that, as soon as I'm on team R or team D, you just don't want to have anything to do with me.
I wouldn't doubt that there might be a division between, say, levels of news and political consumption among groups. So I bet as that goes down, you get less and less affective polarization. That might be. Well, anyway, okay. Flip side, do you have a least favorite episode?
If I had to pull one, it would be our first one. It's just, we were just kind of explaining the topic and such. And the first episode is never the best episode. And so if you made me say which of these 19 great episodes was the least strongest, I would say that one.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that out. Least is comparative, not absolute, right?
Correct.
I think you're right that like, I can't think of a time that I thought we had a bad guest. So even I will admit there were times I was more or less interested in what was going on. Yeah. But even for the times that I was less, I was surprised at all of our guests' abilities to present their material, be conversant, and to sell it, frankly. Yeah. Least though, I'm a little surprised you said that because that is one of the ones I went back and listened to, and I was expecting it to be, it was worse in my memory than it actually is.
Okay.
I listened to it and I was like, wow, that is a strong conversation, a stronger conversation than I thought that we had. I had a tie for my least favorites. Our work goal alignment episode.
Yeah, that one was that would be number 2 on my list. And if you were to say that was the least one, I would not put up much of a fight.
That was one I listened to again too. And it was more so just that we picked a kind of dud paper to talk through, which isn't the worst. It's not like it's the worst day to get to realize what all the flaws of a study are. It makes you kind of feel like you're onto something. Your brain still works. I still feel like we had, you and I, some pretty strong bantery moments that are very easy to listen to. But we also meandered a bit. When I listened to it, it did feel like we started to just like chase the tangents as they occurred.
Surely not.
My other tide though was the Micah Leidorf episode, and that is not because I listened to that one again too. She was stronger than I remember she was just very good about presenting her material, pushing her book. It's only because you know how I feel about fiction books.
Yeah, no, listen, that was, I think we're on the same page there. Neither of us are big fiction consumers. Would that be fair to say?
She sold the stuff very well, but I won't lie. It still had a feeling of like I needed to eat my vegetables. It did not feel like dessert. So, I wouldn't have called it curiosity porn, Curiosity Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue at best, maybe.
There you go.
Something like that. I don't know.
No, I that's fair. I have the same basic feeling, is that not big on fiction. I wanted to try to wrap a little bit, and we did a little bit of this of kind of, okay, what's some of the social commentary that we could pull out of that book and make it less focused strictly on the fiction. We did a little bit of that.
We did a little. And to be, I want to defend you here and say that, well, let me just start by saying, like, you and I, our MO every time is to divide and conquer, to prep for the guest, right? And usually that means whoever was primarily interested in the guest reads the primary work by the guest. The other person tries to do all the extra bells and whistles. Are there other interviews? Are there other like little articles that they read? Have they been on other podcasts? Go do all that stuff. And so I was the person on duty for that for Micah. Mm-hmm. And then like some of it really was so interesting, but it was really difficult to come up with a question that like directly tied her to some of the extra bells and whistles. And so that was a bummer. Because there were some interesting stuff that like she was alluding to in the social sciences. That was pretty good stuff.
No, that's right. That's right. Okay. Let me ask you this. Now that we've kind of ran through some of that, what do you think's going pretty well?
Okay. I do think that we're getting some surprisingly good people, again, for being, maybe we could call it a sophomore podcast at this point. We're calling this an annual reflection, but we've had 18 episodes. That's a year and a half, right?
I think we had some that were, a couple that were more than released once a month. So we had a couple of months where a couple.
That's right. That's true. I forgot about that part. Listening back on our episodes, I think that we are probing guests well. Like there were times when we were definitely willing to push back. This isn't just let the person ham up how right they are about everything. Sure. I think we do that well. I think we have done very well at packaging this in a lighthearted way, despite the fact that we have talked about some pretty dead serious things that are very consequential to people. The fact that we have not just our silly name, but our silly theme song and the silly question at the end, I think it sets the right kind of tone so that like we can talk about really heavy things without a sense of atmospheric threat. Right. I think those are some strong points we got going.
No, I agree with that. That's what I had put down is I think we've done a really good job of being able to get some interesting guests who communicate well with the audience, who can make their point without, meandering about or wandering around for a long time before they get to the point, and who are doing interesting work. To me, that's the point. All of the people that I'm interested because the work they do, I find very interesting and want to share that with others. And so I think they do a good job of that. And I agree also, I think we do a good job in questioning the questions that we come up with, probing and that kind of thing. So I'm right there with you as far as what I think has went pretty well.
I do have a bittersweet, something I think we're doing good, but can we keep doing it or not? And that is that, in fact, you and I had this conversation when we even started the podcast. We didn't care if a book was already 10 years old. Right. If it's really interesting, let's still talk about it. And that person's probably already done press for it or whatever. And the other thing I like about that is part of what's interesting is that like when somebody's work, book, paper, whatever comes out and, gets a press storm and people talk about it, I think it's kind of interesting to see like, okay, how did it weather that many years? Like, is it holding up? Yeah. In hindsight, does it still seem like we got something really insightful from that or would things change? I like that. Yeah. But of course, you can see how that might not always be the best plan for growing a massive audience for a podcast because they're like, I already heard that person interview 4 times 3 years ago about that book. What are you guys doing?
Well, but the likelihood, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say the likelihood that they did may not be as high as we might initially think because we know these people, we know their work, but not everybody else.
No, fair enough.
And that was one of the good things I enjoyed about, again, that Robert Lighton interview was, the first book was it was published right before the Great Recession occurred. Mm. And then his second one was published just a little bit after we'd started coming out of it. And so we could come back and say, okay, we've had this distance between when these books were published, and we got to ask him, what do you think you were on target on, and are there some things that maybe your perspective has changed? And so it's a good way of giving them an opportunity to say, hey, I'm not a prognosticator. I'm not Nostradamus and can just predict the future. Here are some areas where, as new information came in, we learned some more things. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I hope part of our strategy will be to, at least, I don't think we always do, but in several episodes, I think we did good at maybe asking questions that have not been proposed to that guest before in other interviews. I mean, we talked about this. There was a couple questions I almost cut for, maybe it was Chris Fryman. I can't remember. One of our guests. And I was like, I don't know if we have to talk about that. And we immediately said like, wait, but nobody's ever asked him this before. Mm-hmm. And so we kept it. And that made me realize that like, maybe there's a way to make new interviews of old work still interesting, because we're not just parroting like exactly what those people just told to wherever, The Economist or NPR or whatever their venue was that they did. Yeah. What do you think we could do better?
I think one of the things, and we just talked about, asking good questions, and we both think we've done a pretty good job of that. But I think sometimes we get too focused on getting through all the questions that we came up with and not doing as good a job as maybe dwelling on some points that we really want to dive into, right? When someone makes a comment to the question or whatnot, and we're like, do I explore that or do I move on to the next question? Sure. And I think sometimes we get too obsessed with just getting all the questions out there, where maybe illuminating ourselves and the audience a little bit more on this particular idea or concept would be helpful.
Okay, I'm glad you said that last part too, the illuminating part. I basically two things stood out to me as like, here's what I wish we would work on. Number one, it does strike me that sometimes as we're having our interviews and conversations, I don't think we're horrible at this, but I think we're enough that we should work on it. We're willing to talk in such a way that presumes some knowledge on our audience's parts that I think we could have stopped and been more introductory to get more people where we are when we are having the conversation. I even listened to a podcast a while ago. I don't remember what that was called, but they actually in the edits would come like, have like the record scratch noise and like pause for a minute. Here's what that guy's talking about. And then explained it and then went back to the interview. And I don't know that we have to do it in that fashion, but like it dawned on me like, well, the curse of knowledge, right? As soon as you like know some things, you forget what it was like not to understand any of it. And I worry sometimes, even if we're like talking to our guests, like we've read the paper or we read the book, but like the audience might not have any clue who this person is. Yeah. And so I think we could do better at things like making sure we credit the exact paper or the exact book. We've kind of skirted that sometimes. Or when people just throw jargon around just to make sure. I mean, even though Jerry Green was my favorite episode, I mean, he and I were philosophers. And I even said, as we started, like, we might need to slow down and define some of these terms for people. And then we proceeded not to do that ever. So, because like we talk philosophy, so we know what we were talking about. So I think we could do some better deconstructing of deep concepts that people might not be familiar with right out of the gate as we introduce them. The second thing, though, I got convinced after re-listening to our episodes that I think I definitely want us to have guests like we do, but I really do think we should do more chewing up papers together episodes. The first episode and your paper episode were just way stronger than I remember them being in terms of listenability, being interesting. I mean, I think we might get worried because it's not interesting to us. We're like, well, I read the paper. So, but the fact that we can chew it a certain way, I'm like, now I'm listening to it with way more of a listener's experience versus did I write did we pick something interesting to us kind of thing. And you and I also are like constantly reading works that are pretty fascinating to us, things that we want to pull into a classroom, get into front of students because we think it's so interesting. I don't know why this shouldn't or couldn't be more of a testing ground for some of those papers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, that would be good.
Papers, books, news articles, whatever.
All right. How about this? If you could have anybody on the show that you would like, dead or alive, who would you want to have as a guest?
Okay. Now, I warned you before we even started recording that I thought my answer might disappoint you. because here was my problem. I really couldn't think offhand of a guest in the vein of the kinds of guests that we've been having that I'm just like, yes, I would put that person in my dream category. I think you and I both have people we want on and we really want them on, but it's not like lifetime achievement dream interview kind of scenario. That's where I was really trying to go with this when I was thinking of this category. So I prefaced that all to say, it's a tie between two people who are not alive.
Okay.
Neither of whom are philosophers. Are you shocked by that? Neither of whom are historians or social scientists at all. Nat King Cole.
Okay.
The famous jazz singer, who you surely know, Unforgettable and When I Fall in Love. These are not my favorites. I like the work that he did with his trio doing the more upbeat, smoky jazz club kinds of numbers, but it's still all great American songbook stuff. And number 2 would be Ella Fitzgerald.
Okay.
So yes, both jazz singers of the same era.
Musicians.
They're both jazz
singers,
musicians.
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated in them as not just artists. I think they're wonderful. I do frequently listen to them all the time. But why they fascinate me so much is that they had to navigate a space where they had a lot of consumers for their product that also would have grossly mistreated them personally had they encountered. I came upon a story. I was reading John Pizzarelli is another. He's a living jazz artist whose dad, Bucky Pizzarelli, played for all kinds of people. And I was reading his autobiography recently, and he conveyed hearing a story about Nat Cole where somebody, a trumpet player, I think, drove up to the whatever hotel they were going to stay in, and Nat Cole was standing outside by his car with a plate of food on the hood that somebody from the kitchen and in the hotel restaurant had brought out to him because they still refused to have him come in there and eat. And I believe it was the same hotel at which he was just later going to be performing, though. And I just wonder, like, I would love to hear how they made sense of those experiences or what they thought or just what they thought they had to do to navigate that kind of stuff. And I mean, we're just talking about American icons. I mean, I still think arguably this is probably one of the best art forms that America has contributed to the world is jazz. It would just be amazing to be able to sit across from those people and chat with them. Okay. What did you think? Did that shock you, disappoint you?
Yeah, no, that's a little surprising that you would, I shouldn't, knowing your music background and everything, that you might go in that direction. But yeah, I would have thought you'd have picked some,
Don't say Plato.
No, I wasn't going to say Plato. I thought about it, and I was like, no, I'm not even going to poke that sore spot today. But yeah, some great philosopher of bygone, or even more, John Rawls or somebody like that. But
I don't. Yeah, I really did. I tried really hard to think of who it'd be, and none of them just felt like this sort of dream accomplishment sort of thing. You and I have talked about, I don't think it's a dream because I think it's realistic and I don't want to give up on this. But what would be great is to have CT Wynn on the show because he is the one who co-authored that moral outrage porn paper that was the catalyst for the whole idea for the podcast. It would be really cool to come full circle and have him on, even if we didn't talk about that paper, but it would feel very tying up things in a bow in a strange way. I don't know. Or more like christening the ship all the more. Something. I'm searching for a good metaphor here. Your dream guest.
I too would go, first of all, with someone who's no longer with us, but James Madison. Okay. James Madison, I would love to, be able to visit with him and say, okay, you guys put this Constitution together back in 1787. Here's how things have evolved since then. Where do you think you got it right? Where do you think you got it wrong? I'd love to see his assessment of modern politics versus his era. But just someone who I think oftentimes doesn't get as much credit as he deserves as a founding father. His influence on creating the Constitution itself is hard to overestimate. And it would just be really, I think, fascinating to hear from his perspective how the evolution of this system that they created way back then has matured, and what he may or may not like about what we do today versus then, right? So I just think that would be fascinating to me.
Sure. That would. What are we still curious about? What
topics? My gosh,
what?
My list is long. I am still, so there is within economics and political science, there is now a pretty strong body of literature that tries to explain how the modern world became the modern world.
Are we talking about like post-industrial revolution?
Right. So the explosion of wealth around the world, the dramatic rise in living standards across the globe. And so there are some folks out there with different arguments about what was the catalyst for that process to emerge. Most of the folks who examine this they're not super far off about the process from one another, right? So most of them are like some form of liberalism, meaning respect for individual rights, individual autonomy, and individual dignity, market processes. These are the things that in some mixture helped produce this world. But there's one of my favorites in this body of literature, Deirdre McCloskey, argues that this was an ideological shift that occurred beginning in roughly the 1600s and then spreading out initially from kind of Holland into the United Kingdom and then later on around the globe. There are others, the economist Daron Acemoglu and the political scientist James Robinson, who just won the Nobel Prize for their work, arguing that it was the development of certain types of institutions, in their words, the development of inclusive institutions that allowed more people this kind of dignity and rights and such. There's others that have argued that it arose out of the conflict of the military conflict in Western Europe and the need to produce more stuff to be better at waging those wars. So there's different ideas about what was the particular catalyst that all of a sudden you go from 95% of the world's population living in abject poverty to today you have basically 10% or less of the world's population living in that kind of condition. And I just find that whole conversation fascinating, and would really like to get some of those folks who want to explore their thinking a little bit more. So that would be one thing. I am really interested in the role of religion and its impact on society, its impact on government. And there's an author out there, he's a philosopher from Notre Dame who's written a book that I'm reading right now that I would love to have on. We talked to Sam Perry from OU on the topic of Christian nationalism. This author is more exploring into kind of philosophical roots of what he calls Catholic integralism, but just a notion of how do people perceive the relationship between the state and religious institutions and that kind of thing. So that has me curious. Things about income mobility and the basic guaranteed income, these kind of conversations. And then there's just a ton of political science questions that I find I'd like to explore as well. So I have a whole lot. And the last one I'll mention is AI. We haven't yet done a show on AI and how it is already impacting our world and talk about what are the pros and cons and where do we see things going. So some kind of conversation that discusses AI and the future, I think would be really interesting. So those are all, and I could go on and on. But
on that last note, our institution has recently acquired some part-time faculty who work in that area. That
I have heard that rumor. We might be able to get someone on. Yeah,
we might get someone on. Maybe this is half. What are we still curious about? What do I think we could do better? I really would like to get more historians on. Okay. I think that, your first point about like, how did things blow up and get way more awesome than 400 years ago. I would definitely rather live right now than in the same spot in like 1650, where I would have just basically been in a desert and died. But part of it is like, there's so many historians doing really good work that sort of dispel man on the street myths that we have about like, oh, everybody knows this is how that went. And then you look into it like, that's not how that went at all, actually. There are some folks I've told you about who've done interesting work on like Cold War history and the degree to which the Cold War was kind of involved in shaping suburban nuclear family values in America, especially male and female sorts of dynamics. There is a philosopher that I won't name him because I'm still waiting to hear back, but has done some work on the way in which warfare generally has trickled down into the expectations we consider traditional in traditional hetero-romantic relationships, that you wouldn't think they have anything to do with each other. And they're like, no, these were you don't even have to be that guy standing next to the corkboard with all the red tacks and the yarn. Like it's really easy to draw these lines together. I wish we were doing some more stuff like that. Also, I kind of wish we would do, well, we don't always have to do like these big earth-shattering issues. I would love it if sometimes we just had some silly fun on here. I mean, there's definitely things I'm curious about that are, not that earth-shattering. I will preview and say we do at least have a tentative guest to come talk to us about the history of Halloween. That'll be in September. But other things too. I think I've told you before, I keep running into interesting discussions about how do we associate blue with boys and pink with girls. And it turns out that was never settled for a while. And in fact, you had wars between different magazines that were selling clothing that actually completely disagreed and would make arguments that no, pink is clearly a boy's color. I just think some of that stuff is fascinating because and here's why. You and I actually talked about this, is that two things I think that go wrong and probably don't do well for our curiosity is we get over nostalgic for pasts that don't exist. Right. It's not just a nostalgia. We can do that, but like our view of what this nostalgialized past is not how it went down at all. Right. So yeah, we actually don't want to go back to those actual conditions that we think, like, wasn't it good back then? Well, look it up, because probably not. And then number two, the assumption that like the stuff that I take for granted to be normal has just always been that way. Right. And just about anything you can throw out on the table turns out, if you rewind the clock, probably not as far back as you think, you're going to find out, no, it was not always that way. Your way might be the new way that you think like, no, I want it to be traditional. Well, your tradition might only be about 50 years old. So that's kind of jarring. And I love those sorts of, even if it's little things, the way we experience consumer goods or the way advertising has changed compared to now, or I just think some of that would be fascinating to do just for fun. It doesn't always have to be like world economic or voting or even.
We're academics. Are we allowed to have fun? Is that, I didn't know that was in the job description.
I think it's okay. I think we give ourselves permission. We are called Curiosity Porn. You and I have talked multiple times about like, are we scaring guests away?
See, I do have this question, and are some of the folks that we would like to get, are they like, I don't know, maybe not, right? I mean, obviously it hasn't been a barrier to all of them, but there are a few that the responses I've got have almost been like, I don't think you're a real thing, or I don't want to be associated with that.
Based on the actual people that we've gotten, I just doubt that it's doing as much negative publicity as you might think. Some of the people that we've even got have not shied away from being on some controversial platforms or getting interviewed in way more antagonistic ways than we would do. So I just wonder if some of these people that we've had on that were great guests, they're battle hardened enough that like this title is not what's doing. Obviously not for them because they came and were on it. But I just can't imagine that we've got people who think like their professional reputations are that fragile. Like I just don't. that would surprise me if they really believed that.
Yeah. I don't know. We might have to get some of our possibilities folks to weigh in on that and see what they think.
But I think it's worth saying our entire launch was the idea that couldn't we package things interestingly enough that people would actually have their curiosity piqued more so than they otherwise would have. Do you think we're doing that?
I think for the most part we are. I get positive feedback when people say, "Hey, I listened to that episode and I thought that was really fascinating," or whatnot. So yeah, for the most part, I think we are. But I always have this little question in the back of my mind: is that name prohibiting some people from wanting to, or even prohibiting some of our listeners from wanting to share it too broadly, right? They don't want to. I don't know. Well, I don't know. That's still a question I have. I'm not sure.
Maybe I will fall back on the adage that I don't think is entirely true all the time. It has some truth to it. All publicity is good publicity.
Okay.
I wonder if our title could be functioning like the new Coke fiasco, where there were people who didn't even drink Coke that were mad about that.
Mad about it.
Yeah.
It could be possible.
And
right?
so maybe we're getting attention from the title, and attention might lead the right people our way, perhaps. But look, the joking aside, I think we had this noble cause that I think is still a noble one, especially in view of the episode we did where you want us to stop hating each other. Wouldn't it be better, even in the face of what could trigger our sort of identity protective sorts of cognition, wouldn't it be better to have some tendency toward being curious rather than threatened?
Yes.
And wouldn't we, even if we still walk away thinking, I still think you're wrong about that, wouldn't that still be a more beneficial experience? Now, I think that's a worthy cause, but what we really got to wrestle with is us. You realize the only way we're going to push that is by modeling it.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
Okay, 18 episodes deep, and we're talking on number 19 right now. Do you think you have increased the strength of your curiosity muscle? Do you find yourself now able to encounter topics that maybe a year and a half ago you would have just, waved your hand at, dismissed, whatever? I'm not even going to dignify that.
Yes, and
do you think you can be curious more so now?
I'm gonna talk about an episode that we did just recently with a philosopher talking about. Now, just the harms of not speaking. When you feel like you want to speak, but you're afraid that there's going to be social reaction, so you don't speak.
Yeah. So this was just so everybody knows, Dr. Emily McWilliams, whose paper was about testimonial withdrawal.
Testimonial withdrawal. That's right. If you had brought that concept up to me 2 years ago, I would have dismissed that so quickly. And I will admit, I still had some problems grappling with that. But the conversation was actually interesting to me, and the conversation of how people think about this, and it made me think about some of these things in a little bit different way, right? So yes, I think for me personally, it has helped me broaden my willingness to explore some ideas that perhaps in the past I would just immediately dismiss out of hand.
Well, that's fantastic. I will have to tell Dr. McWilliams that she has helped you see the light. No, but I actually like that you bring up that example, because here is what I think goes on in a lot of those cases. And that is that before and without even having the chance to be curious about some of these topics, I think we've kind of been preconditioned to already have some gut check about them. So I will tell you lately that I have decided I want to start reading a lot more. I think I told you this a few months ago. I want to start reading. This is not my area. You realize my specialty in philosophy is ethics. Right. But I really just wanted, for my own personal benefit, to start reading a whole lot more professional work, empirical and philosophical, about matters of oppression in social classes. Because it dawned on me, God, if you just doom scroll on your phone, people are going to give you clickbait about oh, I'm so oppressed. When are they though? Or you aren't really oppressed when they totally are. Yeah, I mean, they're like we're, I think, almost pre-sold to want to downplay, misunderstand, mischaracterize people's experiences that might be legitimately complicated. And so like, I feel like I at least want to know about this stuff before I ever say like, man, that's not a big deal. Or maybe like, wow, just kidding, I was wrong. That's a big deal. And so I'm wondering if that wasn't part of like why testimonial withdrawal specifically might have been maybe a topical trigger for, well, both of us. I mean, the only difference is I've had about 4 or 5 months now of reading a bunch of stuff in that regard, and you did not. And
here's my thing. I've been thinking about this for a few years now. I'm a big believer in academic freedom and the ability of academics to explore whatever questions they want to explore, right? And I think a lot of academics are curious. That's why they get into this, right? This is interesting to me. I want to learn more about it. I want to know how this works and interacts with other things. And so I've come to have a greater appreciation for people who explore areas that they're certainly not my bailiwick, and may even initially sound like I'm pretty sure that's all wrong, right? But I've told some people that I have a few podcasts that I listen to that I don't listen to them because I just agree with everything that's said on there. In fact, I listen to them because I know a lot of what's said I'm not going to agree with, but it forces me to engage with some ideas and concepts and ways of thinking that I would not have done before. And I think that makes me better able to grapple with all of these different questions and such. So I definitely think the show itself has helped me be a little bit more open to hearing and investigating things and seeing what people have come up with.
I will admit to you that due to your guest selection, you have definitely convinced me that it is worthwhile to be more curious about some straightforwardly economic issues than I otherwise would have been. Now, that's not even a matter of agreement or disagreement, but just like, that's a thing where I previously would have thought like, man, that doesn't sound very interesting to me. And then partly to the credit of our guests just being excellent interviewees, I was like, wow, that's actually pretty fascinating, actually. I think Munger did a fantastic job. To this day, the sharing economy stuff just blows my, I'm like thinking like, wow, the whole world would be different if like we just did things that I would only need like 700 square feet of house to live if I just didn't have to have all the stuff.
That
right?
Depends on how many children you have.
Well, all right. Or the one I was gone for, who was that again?
Robert Leighton. Yeah.
Well, I still listen to that for the edit purposes. And I won't lie, when you told me about the guest, I was like, okay, well, if I have to miss one, I guess I'm glad it's that one. But then I listened to the edit and he just did such a fantastic job of selling the interestingness of what he was working on. Right. And so I have at least tried, and I think I've succeeded in 18 months to have initial curiosity about things 18 months ago. I just would have thought like, that sounds boring. I don't care. Right. And I'm starting to realize, you know what, for any of the topics that we could come up with that maybe we aren't currently interested in, somebody is so interested in that they will probably be able to sell you on why, in fact, it is kind of interesting. And so I've tried to like, not have that initial like, man, who cares? And instead be like, well, I wonder why that's a big deal to somebody. Right. And so I think it has helped me definitely do that. Okay. I think it's time to lighten it up. Okay. You know, one of our calling cards, now it took us like 4 or 5 episodes to get with this. But one of our calling cards, one of our things that we do is we ask all of our guests this special question at the end of every episode. It's us pitting against 30 Rock and Seinfeld, right, our favorite comedies. So we've had a lot of answers. Do you have a favorite answer? Do you have somebody who gave an answer that was you thought was the best answer we got?
I think the mountain of people who selected Seinfeld were all my favorite answer.
I asked you for a favorite answer. We'll come to fine. By the way, I did score it up. I actually went back and counted and tallied who got how many votes. Yes, you are decisively winning. I counted 10 guests that picked Seinfeld and 3 that picked 30 Rock. Okay.
I think there were a couple that were like, I've not seen them, either one of them, and so they didn't choose. Weren't there a couple?
Yes, that's why Munger's not on the list. He did. That was almost my favorite answer. He's like, I have a way of making everyone angry, so neither. And it was like, all right, dude. I have a favorite answer though. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
And it might surprise you because of what I said earlier about this episode. I think my favorite answer was Micah Lydorf's answer. Do you remember what she said?
I don't.
She said, I still love this and revel in it. She says, I'm going to pick Seinfeld, but not because I think it's funnier or clever, because it's not. 30 Rock is. I'm just nostalgic for that time period. And you were like, Baha, the point is mine. And I was like, I don't know. I kind of got a point out of that. And you were like, nope, that is not a point for you. And I said, I just got told your show is preferable, even though mine is funnier. And I think that was my favorite one that we ever got. Yeah.
That is a good one. That's a good one. So how did you score her then?
Oh, no, she picked Seinfeld, so she's on the Seinfeld side.
Okay. All right. I've got one for you, which I didn't tell you in advance. But I was thinking about what's the best one-liner that we've had on the show? What's the best kind of quick quip about anything? And I pulled out Munger's, when we had him on, he was one of our early guests. And we're still, it's always when you're reaching out to someone, do you say, hey, we have a podcast, and you don't tell them the name and you just provide the link? Or do you say, hey, we have a podcast called whatever, right? So, but he knew, and so he comes on, and we were talking about, you were actually visiting and mentioning the fact that he's on every podcast you can find, right? And he said that he had to admit that he was guilty of podcast promiscuity, and I thought that was just perfect for the name of our show.
Surely he came up with that. It had to be his coinage. No, you didn't prep me on this, but I think I can come up with a couple. One is a guest and one is me. Is that bad? Is that too vain?
No.
The guest was Jerry Miller, and we used it as our teaser, and I think it might still be my favorite teaser, where he says, one way to reduce crime in an area is just to make sure that less things count as crime. And I just thought that was genius. That was our Tyranny of Metrics episode, right?
That's right. Right. Yeah.
I just thought that was brilliant, and that summarized so much of what he was criticizing of the way that we get tyrannized by metrics. Right. I only say this because I re-listened to a bunch of episodes to prep for this, and it was the episode about your paper that you want us to stop hating each other. And we brought up the article. I think it was in Time or Business Week. It was a major news publication, but the title of the article was "How Liberal Is Your Burger?"
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
And we went through some of that article, and it's really fascinating stuff. I mean, down to like where I buy my donuts seems to be indicative of the likelihood of me being in one party or the other. I mean, that's what we were talking about. But I said in there, you would think that a burger is one thing that most Americans could rally around and unite, but turns out no.
No.
Yeah. Burgers won't do it. Burgers won't.
Well, I tell you what, it's been a great year. I feel like we've had some good guests. We've got some good guests coming up this year as well.
We've got a few on the books already.
And if any of our listeners, if there's something you're curious about, let us know.
Send us some email.
Let us know what you would like us to talk about, or if you have a particular guest that you'd like us to reach out to. Let us know, because we want you to find this as interesting as we're finding it, and communicate with us. So please do that.
Yes, it'll be in the episode tag, but I'll say it again right now anyway. curprn@gmail.com. Me and James have a look at that email, and we would love it if you could suggest some things. And believe us, we will be happy to throw out invites to all kinds of people if they'd be willing to show up and chat with us.
Exactly right.
And we hope that you will still be here in 12 more. Well, I won't say episodes. I think you and I have talked about maybe we'll work on the frequency this year.
Sure.
But a year from now, when we talk about what went good for us in 25.
Yes, absolutely. And And we hope that you won't just be here, but that you'll bring a friend or two along as well.
Yes, please.
All right. We'll see you later.
Thanks for listening to Curiosity Porn with the two best intellectual pole dancers in the United States, Dr. Guy Crane and Professor James Davenport. If you'd like to share a comment about today's episode, suggest a guest or topic, or just leave a compliment or complaint, you can reach us at curprn@gmail.com. We hope to hear from you.